Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see you all here today. So in recent weeks, we've been talking about the Lotus Sutra, which in its usual version contains about 28 chapters. And today we'll be talking about chapter 25, one of the better known chapters of the Lotus Sutra. Portions of this chapter are often recited in Buddhist temples, at least in those influenced by the Mahayana tradition or the Tibetan tradition. The title of the 25th chapter, according to the Jean Reeves translation that we've been using, is the universal gateway of the Bodhisattva, regarder of the cries of the world. Regarder of the cries of the world. The Sanskrit name that this is translated into is Avalokiteshvara. So who is Avalokiteshvara? Well, in China, the name for Avalokiteshvara is Quan Yin or Quan Yin. In Japan, it is Kannon or Kanseon. There is a 10-line verse that is frequently recited in the Soto Zen literature. It goes something like this. Kanseyo namu butsuyo butsuyo en yo butsuyo en buboso en jo rakuga jo chonen kanseyon bonen kanseyon nennen jushin ki nennen furishin. And then that is repeated 10 times, usually at faster and faster pace. So the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, widespread in the Buddhist traditions. So we'll talk a little bit about who this figure is, and then we'll get into the text of the 25th chapter. Avalokiteshvara is usually described as the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Bodhisattva representing compassion or compassion and wisdom, because there is wisdom in compassion. The name Avalokiteshvara is variably translated. And part of this is because in different Sanskrit texts, the name is spelled somewhat differently. So one translation is the Lord who looks down. The other type of translation is along the lines of she who hears the cries of the world. The origins of Avalokiteshvara are somewhat obscure. There is speculation that he or she derived from Hindu deities. Avalokiteshvara does not appear in the Pali Canon, in the canon of the early Buddhism, but appears very early in the canon of Mahayana Buddhism. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, Avalokiteshvara is a figure, and this sutra probably preceded the Lotus Sutra. There are artistic renditions of Avalokiteshvara, and I'd like to show you a couple of these. This one is from Fa Guan Shan Temple in Taiwan, and it shows a figure with many arms, and each of the hands, you'll notice, has a different shape, a different mudra, a different posture of the hands. And this symbolizes the many different ways in which Avalokiteshvara can be of help, can be of assistance to us. Sometimes there are versions where there is an eyeball in the palm of each hand so that Avalokiteshvara can see what is needed and can respond accordingly. Sometimes there are as many as 1,000 arms, and other times just 2. In this statuary of Avalokiteshvara, which is housed at the St. Louis Art Museum, by the way, he or she is depicted as either female or somewhat androgynous. And as Avalokiteshvara migrated from India to China, she went from a relatively male form to a more female form, sometimes a frankly female form. In this version, which is Tibetan, Avalokiteshvara has implements in each hand to allow her or him to address whatever issue is needed, whatever help is needed. And in this modern rendition of Avalokiteshvara, made out of molded rubber, the artist Rudolf Stengel has depicted Avalokiteshvara with the tools of his trade as a sculptor. So Avalokiteshvara is a mythical figure, a fabrication of the human mind. Who is there to help us, is there to help us with difficulties. So I think I'll, at this point, read some selections from chapter 25 to give you a taste of the text. At that time, the Bodhisattva, inexhaustible mind, got up from his seat, bared his right shoulder, put his palms together, facing the Buddha, and said, "World-honored one, for what reason does the Bodhisattva, regarder of the cries of the world, have the name regarder of the cries of the world?" So this sutra starts with a question, like many of the chapters in the Lotus Sutra, a question for the Buddha. The Buddha answered, "Inexhaustible mind, Bodhisattva, good son, if there were countless hundreds of thousands of billions of living beings experiencing suffering and agony who heard of this regarder of the cries of the world, Bodhisattva, and wholeheartedly called her name, regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva would immediately hear their cries, and all of them would be freed. In my reading of this text, I am substituting female pronouns for male pronouns. In early Chinese, before the 20th century, the third-person pronouns were not gendered. So it's hard to know what was intended. But Avalokiteshvara always seems like a female form to me, and oftentimes is depicted that way. So that's the way I'll choose to read these sections. Even if the 3,000 great thousand-fold world were full of satyrs and ogres seeking to torment people, these evil spirits, hearing the people call the name regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, with their wicked eyes, they would not even be able to see them, much less hurt them. If, moreover, someone guilty or not guilty is captured and put in stocks or manacles and chains, and they call the name of regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, their bonds will be broken and they will be freed. Suppose a 3,000 great thousand-fold world were full of vengeful thieves, and a caravan leader was guiding a group of merchants carrying costly treasures over a dangerous road. If just one among the merchants speaks out saying, "Good sons, do not be afraid," wholeheartedly good sons, do not be afraid, wholeheartedly call out the name regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, for this Bodhisattva is able to give courage to all the living. If you invoke this Bodhisattva's name, you will be freed from these vengeful thieves. Hearing this, if all the traders together with one voice cry out, "Praise to the regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva," by calling that name, they will be freed from their danger. Inexhaustible mind, such are the awesome divine powers of the Great One, regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva. If any living beings are afflicted with a great deal of lust, let them keep in mind and revere regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, and they will be freed from their desire. If they have a great deal of anger and rage, let them keep in mind and revere regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, and they will be freed from their anger. If they are deluded by great folly, let them keep in mind and revere regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, and they will be freed from their stupidity. Inexhaustible mind, regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, has such great divine powers and can abundantly benefit the living. Therefore, all the living should constantly keep this Bodhisattva in mind. Inexhaustible mind Bodhisattva said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, why does the regarder of the cries of the world travel around the world? How does she teach the Dharma for the sake of the living? What sort of power of skillful means does she have?" The Buddha replied to Inexhaustible Mind Bodhisattva, "Good son, if living beings in any land need someone in the body of a Buddha in order to be saved, regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva appears as a Buddha and teaches the Dharma for them." For those who need someone in the body of an elder in order to be saved, she appears as an elder and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need someone in the body of an ordinary citizen in order to be saved, she appears as an ordinary citizen and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need somebody in the body of a high official in order to be saved, she appears as a high official and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need someone in the body of a Brahmin in order to be saved, she appears as a Brahmin and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need someone in the body of a monk, nun, layman, laywoman in order to be saved, she appears as a monk, nun, layman, or laywoman and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need somebody in the body of a wife of an elder, ordinary citizen, high official, or Brahmin, in order to be saved, she appears as a wife and teaches the Dharma for them. For those who need somebody in the body of a boy or a girl in order to be saved, she appears as a boy or girl and teaches the Dharma for them. Inexhaustible mind, such are the blessings attained by this regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, and the various forms in which she travels around in many lands to save the living. This is why all of you should wholeheartedly make offerings to the regarder of the world Bodhisattva. The regarder of the cries of the world Bodhisattva, this great one is able to bestow freedom from fear on those who are faced with a frightening, urgent, or difficult situation. This is why in this world everyone gives her the name bestower of freedom from fear. Bestower of freedom from fear. Wonderful voice, regarder of the cries of the world, Brahma voice, voice of the rolling tide, world surpassing voice. She should always be kept in mind, never have a moment of doubt about her. The pure and holy regarder of the cries of the world by those in suffering and agony or facing death, she can be relied on for protection. Equipped with all blessings, viewing all with compassionate eyes, she, ocean of accumulated blessings, is immeasurable. Heads should be bowed to her. So, so what are we to make of all of this? On some level, it may sound kind of magical or superstitious or even childish. But this mythical figure has been passed down through many, many generations, honored by many people, and the presence of Avalokiteshvara has been of immeasurable help to many, many people in different parts of the world over the centuries. So it seems unwise to discount that and just say, oh, this is a fairy tale. What are these mythical figures and how are we to, in a sense, use them? They are for us. They are human fabrications that are made to help us. What does it mean to be free of difficulties? In what way is she providing help? Well, in the sutra, it says she is there to teach the Dharma. What is the Dharma? The Dharma is, of course, the teachings of the Buddha, and it's also the ways of the world, the laws of nature, the way things are. The teachings of the Buddha are to help us align ourselves with reality. And Avalokiteshvara is a reminder of those teachings, a reminder of those realities. The three marks of existence that the Buddha described are anicca, anatta, and dukkha. Anicca, impermanence. Anatta, no self. Dukkha, unsatisfactoriness of compounded things, of conditioned phenomena. Now, we could, in times of difficulty, remember those concepts. But remember that concepts are also human fabrications. And concepts speak to the intellect more than the heart. And in times of difficulty, what one craves for, what one desires, is something that speaks to the heart. And a personification, such as Avalokiteshvara, can be a reminder, a voice to speak to the heart. The people who composed these verses, these lines, and the people who have heard them over the ages are not fools. They know. They know that if someone's attacking you with a sword, there's not going to be some magical being that appears and shatters the sword and protects you from getting severed. But they also know that in times of great difficulty or threat, one of the most painful things to experience is the experience of aloneness, separation, fear. And Avalokiteshvara has the power to help us with that, to remind us that we are not separated, that self and other are blurred. And the fear can be assuaged. Avalokiteshvara will not allow us to live a life without adversity or difficulty, of course. But Avalokiteshvara can help us deal with that difficulty, manage those adversities, and transcend the fear that arises from feeling alone and threatened. So she is there to remind us that there is a well of compassion for self and others that is always available, regardless of what difficulties we encounter, even if they be life-threatening. and she can be called upon at any time. So I think I'll stop there and just leave you with the questions. How does all this strike you? Does this strike you as something that may be helpful to you? Or does it strike you as just kind of one of those historical oddities? And in what ways can Avalokiteshvara save us? What does it mean to be saved? Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your attention today, and we'll go into breakout rooms and get together later on.